Welcome, nerds. How's your day been going? I'm with my boy Paris Wood. What's up, Paris?
Not much, man. How about you?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing fine.
All right. So this week our topic that we're going to talk about is should Microsoft or Sony be worried about the Nintendo Switch? I think this is a great topic to talk about right now. We just got word that on March 3rd, 2017, 4.7 million units have been sold from Nintendo. And I want to ask the age-old question. Should Microsoft and or Sony be worried about this? Let me know what you think.
Um, well, definitely, I want to hear from you guys down in the comments. So, make it rain down there if you watch this video, please. But as for me, I do think they should be worried because we talked about this in the past. Nintendo, even though it's more understated than your Xbox or your PS4 for hardcore gamers, usually sets trends. And so I think we're probably going to see, if nothing else, maybe an integrated handheld to console system from Sony, because like you've mentioned, they have experience with handhelds. And I think that if they have just any other game that's as big as Breath of the Wild is, then yeah, I think if they have one more console seller, Microsoft and Sony are going to have to watch their asses.
Mm-hmm. So kind of to elaborate on what you just said, one of the things that I had written down here was, if anything, I think Sony is more likely to kind of copy the quote unquote handheld to console route. They've already broken into the market with the PSP, the PlayStation Vita. So in a way, do they have it as much as Nintendo does? No, not by a long shot, not between the 3DS and now the Switch, but at least Sony has entered that market in some capacity. If Microsoft wanted to do that, it would be a whole new market that they would be entering into.
They'd have to develop an entirely new system. I don't think they have any precedent for like a handheld device. Can you think of a Microsoft handheld device?
No, I mean, like I said, like the closest thing is like, and this is going way out of line, but like the Surface tablet, but that's
Yeah,
like not even
they would
maybe.
have to do something with phones, I guess. But
Yeah,
even it's not like a huge. They don't have the experience. But here's what I think about Sony: the Vita released to a massive flop. You don't hear much about the Vita at all among gamers. So I'm,
you
I'm
don't
actually
hear
kind
it
of
from
wondering,
Sony. You don't even hear about it from Sony.
they don't promote it. So I'm
No.
wondering are if they're scarred and scared away from handheld devices. But really, on the major question, Nintendo moving 4.7 Nintendo Switch units in such a short period of time, and them having such a huge game. I think I heard someone mention, and again, this is hearsay, so check the sources here for the audience. Something to the effect that Breath of the Wild is one of the has the most 10 out of 10 reviews on Metacritic.
It
It is a
yes, it
console.
is. It is the best rated video game on Metacritic.
Like that's
Yeah,
insane,
for
right?
sure. Yeah,
Out of the
and
thousands of games.
that's it. Next to these greats like GTA 5, these are all games that have gotten 10 out of 10s in the past. But another thing I'd like to talk about that is there's this whole talk that, what game is going to get the Breath of the Wild treatment. And what I mean by that is taking a game that we are so familiar with and transforming it the way they transform Legend of Zelda. And I think the pretty obvious answer is Mario Odyssey, right? Mario Odyssey is coming out on October 27th. It's literally right around the corner. These are two of Nintendo's biggest franchises coming out on the same year as a new console. You can't get any better than that. You get a new Legend of Zelda and you get a new Mario game. And the Mario Odyssey game is looking like it could possibly be even better than the Legend of Zelda. And that's
Now
going to push
that's the
consoles.
claim. Hold on. Now I wanna hop on that.
Okay.
So one of the things Breath of the Wild did, I think, really well, and full disclosure, I don't have experience with the game, but it sort of hopped on the survival and the open world bandwagons, right? Where
Absolutely.
it integrated these two things into one of a classic genre, a classic
Hmm.
franchise. What could they possibly do to Mario to capitalize on that same sort of culture, the same gaming
Sure.
conditions, make
Sure.
it blow up like Breath of the Wild did?
So I think so I guess what I mean by the Breath of the Wild treatment, right, is not necessarily taking Mario and turning it into an open world survival-esque type game. You know, like you're not going to see Mario in that situation, I don't think ever, just to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think what they're doing here with Mario, I think what they're doing here with Mario Odyssey specifically is taking what made Mario 64 great. You know, what made what was the GameCube one? This is gonna aggravate
Luigi's
me.
Mansion?
No,
Trail Sunshine.
yeah, Mario Sunshine. Yes, you know, I think they're kind of like when they announced. Do you remember when they announced the Nintendo Switch and they basically like we took the best ideas from all of our consoles and that's what gave us inspiration for the Switch. I'm really am thinking that it's very similar with Mario Odyssey. Is they're taking what worked for every single Mario game and combining it into this one game, and there's this introduction of a new character called Cappy, which is obviously his hat, who in some way somehow comes to life. I think that Mario is going to be this big open world game that you can sync just like Zelda, right? That you can literally, just because you beat the final boss doesn't mean you beat the game in any way, shape, or form. And I think another thing that like the Legend of Zelda had for it was the fact that what you did last night on Legend of Zelda and what I did last night on Legend of Zelda, even though we started at the same place, the Great Plateau, I went east, you went west, right? Or, you know, anybody could literally start the game at the same point and have a completely different story to tell the next day with their friends. And I think Mario will have something very similar because I don't think that I'm really noticing that we're kind of getting into a time with video games where they're not linear in any way, shape, or form. You know, they're really making these games that like level up with the player. They're not punishing you for accidentally walking into the wrong area that's meant for somebody who's like, say, you know, like take The Witcher for example. You have to be a certain level to go to certain areas. You don't necessarily see that with Breath of the Wild. You're free to kind of go and explore where you want to some, you know, to some extent, but for the most part, they're not holding the player back.
But that being said, The Witcher, even with that sort of gated formula, they're still very successful. You know, with the and some people want that hardcore experience. But
I think
to
the best
your
rated
point,
game of 2015.
yeah, it was. But to your point, I think you're right. I mean, because what did Nintendo do well with the Wii? They captured the broadest audience, and they appealed to a lot of casual gamers. And I think that if they are careful and they're crafty with their use of, I guess, new developments on Mario Odyssey, they could probably do that same thing while still keeping hardcore gamers involved, you know, by making so that you don't have the same story to tell with as the other guy, you know, by making this wide open narrative.
Right. I think another thing we need to think about too, Paris, is the fact that I can't walk into my local GameStop, I can't walk in my local Target, Walmart, Best Buy, and find a Nintendo Switch on the shelves. So another very real question that I want to ask is, yeah, 4.7 million units in about 5 months is great, but how much more could it have been if stock was readily available for this?
Yeah, and that's the catch-22, because from what I understand it, and toy developers or toy companies do this as well, they sort of fix the inventory so that there's not enough to go around and anticipation goes up. Yep. But the danger when they do that, you know, we live in a very now society. It's not like games are not the same genre or the same market as toys. Toys are specialty items depending on the toy you're trying to get, and there's only one model of that toy. When it comes to consoles, it's a much smaller field. You know what you want, and you know that if you have $500 to spend on the console and the Wii Switch, if the Switch is not available, you can spend it on one of the other competing consoles.
Absolutely, yes.
So I think that the
Xbox One S and the PlayStation 4 Slim are literally sitting right there in the glass case.
Yes, and so Nintendo is sort of hamstringing itself, I think, with this toy mentality, because people aren't going to wait for things to come in stock, and some aren't even going to wait for an Amazon shipment. They're just not.
No. So another point that I would like to bring up is the fact that this is the kind of newest console from the big three: Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft. This is the newest console in 4 years, basically, right? So the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 both came out in November of 2013, And I'm thinking like this is the newest, greatest thing, which I think already gives it a push in the right direction, just because it is the newest, greatest, quote unquote toy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then so these are just some numbers I looked up. So like both systems managed to sell 1 million units in less than 24 hours. I'm talking about Microsoft and Sony right now. And both sold millions more by the end of 2013, more than 3 years out, though the PS4 has sold roughly twice as well as the Xbox One overall. As demand for Microsoft's system has slowed considerably, if you expected a closer long-term sales competition based on linear projection after a day or even a month of sales, you'd have been very inaccurate. So right now, if anything... so let me just give you my overall answer, right? Should Sony or Microsoft be worried about the Nintendo Switch? Here's my answer for you right now, Paris. No, not yet. And here's why. 4.7 million units is great, but even out of the gate, the Xbox One was selling better than the Switch. Unfortunately, I think that rough E3 announcing the Xbox One killed it. I mean, I remember you and me sat down, and me being an Xbox fan, I was like, this isn't good. This isn't good. And I immediately knew that, like, oh, Microsoft, what are you doing, baby? PlayStation 4 is probably pushing 65 million units right now.
Well,
Which means, so like we said, 2-to-1. Let's say Microsoft is pushing 30 to 32.5 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
let me play devil's advocate, all right?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna be that guy, the guy that just contradicts everything everyone always says. So, all right. So Sony is the big player on the block right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. But I completely lost my train of thought. Actually, no, hold on. I mean, it's gone. It's gone.
Is it something similar to where, like, look, just because there's great... I think I might be I think I know where you're going.
Okay, I got it. I remember what it was.
You can easily fall from the top.
Not even that. I mean, Microsoft and Sony, they just spent God knows how much money in sort of like a 0.5 version of a console, right? Like you have the Xbox One, you have the Xbox, what is it, Scorpio?
You gotta think there's 3 now, right? You have the original PlayStation, you have the PlayStation 4 Slim, and now you got the PlayStation 4 Pro. On top of that, it's basically asymmetrical with what Microsoft's doing. You have the original Xbox One, now you have the Xbox One S, and now you're going to have the Xbox One X.
Right, and so those two companies keep developing these sort of incremental improvements to their Xbox One and PS4 to sort of compete with each other, right?
Yes.
Where is Nintendo spending its money? It's spending its money always on these
dedicated, right, yes.
And you get things like the Switch, you get things like the Wii U, and as bad as the Wii U was, what it says is Nintendo is always willing to experiment because
they absolutely are.
Exactly, and the whole idea where you have a handheld item that attaches to your console, that started with the Wii U, and that fully evolved in the Switch. Yep. And so if they keep thinking about the long game, if Sony and Microsoft keep playing this sort of incremental battle, I think they stand to fall behind the company that did at one point dominate back in the Wii generation, back in the PS3 generation and the Xbox 360 generation.
Sure. So I guess here's my argument for you. Nintendo really saw great sales numbers with the base Nintendo Wii, not the Wii U. I'm talking about Nintendo Wii right now. We saw like over 100 million consoles, right? But this was also that weird console that even my grandparents had, your grandparents had, for some reason, at one point in time, everybody had a Nintendo Wii in their house. And it was always, I had Nintendo Wii and I had Wii Sports. Like, that was the family game night game that you would play when people came over.
Yes.
And I think, like, unfortunately, to me, that's not going to happen with the Switch. I think the Switch is very gamer focused, whereas the Nintendo Wii had broader appeal for these quote unquote like non-gamers, right? Like you and me are considered hardcore gamers,
Yeah.
but the people who are playing their mobile game on the bus are also the ones who, if they were going to pick up a home console, it probably would have been the Nintendo Wii at the time. Now, another thing is, here's what's kind of going to determine the Switch's life value to me is like, yeah, don't get me wrong, The Legend of Zelda and Mario Odyssey, these are all great. I don't think anybody's really arguing the fact that Nintendo has the best first-party titles or franchises behind their belt. But where's the third-party support, right? You know, Call of Duty, Destiny, Anthem, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry. These are all games that are literally coming out within the next year that will probably not see the light of day on the Switch, and that will hurt it. I mean, like, to me, like, that's just, I don't see how anybody can argue the fact that, like, that will hurt that console.
I can agree to that, but here would be my clap back to that. So, just for the record, the Switch is very clearly geared towards more hardcore gamers. I mean, the only people that intend to transport a major console or a major item like that and bring it around and play it on the go are people who are very into gaming. They're hobbyists like you and me. They do it a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as Nintendo's marketing goes, they don't have to make lightning strike again with the Switch. When it comes to 2 or 3 years from now, if they have another project in the works that's specifically for casuals, and they decide to ring that bell and they say we have this great item for families to get together and play on, what are your grandparents going to do when they see Sony, Microsoft, these two machines they have no familiarity with, and then they see Nintendo? Nintendo, those are the guys that made the Wii. We played bowling with the grandchildren on the Wii.
Sure.
That puts them in a great market position by name only, because casual people have had a lot of fun with that console with friends. So it might not be the Switch, but it is not a far leap from where the Switch is to another console or another system, another platform that says the family can get together and play, and they have prime market position to exploit that.
Sure. I mean, think about it. The Switch is the only console that technically comes with 2 controllers out of the gate. The 2 Joy-Cons, right?
Yeah, and Xbox and PS4 controllers are what $70?
I think so. I think Xbox One, PlayStation 4 controllers are like $65. So here's the thing. The Joy-Cons, for both Joy-Cons, you're looking at $80. So you're already spending more for 2 Joy-Cons. That's a left and right one. And then the Pro controller for the Nintendo Switch, I think, is $75. So the controllers, the accessories for the Switch are priced a little bit higher than the competition.
Okay.
So here's another argument I'd like to make. Nintendo doesn't have the basics. I think when somebody goes out to buy a console, they're looking for a kind of like an all-in-one device, right? Yes, they're obviously buying it primarily to play video games, but I would like a Blu-ray player. You know, I like my Netflix and Hulu apps. I want to browse the web. And these are all things that the Switch has yet to integrate into the system. There's no Netflix, there's no Hulu, and I think those are 2 huge apps that have to be on a video game console. Without my Xbox, I wouldn't. That's my Netflix machine, right? Is my Xbox. I'm not opening my laptop and watching Netflix. And on top of that, there's not even a web browser. So I hear a lot of people complain, like, "Yeah, we're taking our Switches around the world with us, but there's no web browser for me to log into the hotel's internet when I get to my hotel," which I think is a huge. Don't get me wrong. Will this be fixed? I don't see how it couldn't. Right? If I had to answer that question, I'd say absolutely. But my question is, why wasn't the support there on launch? It's unfortunate.
And they're still missing the opportunity if they don't fix it fast, because people will find alternatives and they'll get in the habit of using those alternatives.
Yep.
So I do think that they stand to hurt themselves by not addressing that sooner rather than later. And I'm not sure how responsive Nintendo has been in the past to lacking huge things like that. I mean, for the Wii, wasn't there talk about them integrating some sort of DVD or Blu-ray capability, and they never did? And in fact, what they wound up doing was they rolled back things. Like, I have a Wii that has the ability to play GameCube games.
Yes.
It has ports for GameCube.
Yes. It's got It can play GameCube games. It's got the GameCube controller port, and it's got the GameCube memory card slots.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but later generations of Wii don't have those, do they?
I think you are correct, but I am also not 100%. But okay, I do think that is accurate. So final points here, final arguments. I'll go ahead and give mine. You can go ahead and give me your rebuttal if you've got one.
All right.
Online gaming. That is a huge portion of the video game console world, right?
Yeah.
Is online gaming. And I'm even going back to Call of Duty, Destiny, Battlefield, Battlefront. We've got all these great games that are going to be very online focused.
Mm-hmm.
Nintendo Switch does not have a good integrated online service.
Okay.
It's very unfortunate that we're still using friend codes to send friend invites. Like, come on, what is you doing?
It's arcade.
Yeah, right. I'll argue this to my grave. If you are an online gamer and you want the best online experiences, I'm gonna point you to Microsoft every single time, because I think that's what they've built. That's where their foundation is to me when it comes to that. PlayStation is good for other things, and I think there's no arguing that PlayStation is great for it. Also, it's kind of like first party genre. They've had great games this year like Horizon, Nier Automata, just to name a few. We've got Uncharted DLC coming out later this year. So really, like, if somebody came up to me and said, hey Carl, what video game console should I get? The first thing I'm going to ask them is, what are you going to do more with it? Are you going to play online? Are you going to play? What's more important to you? Playing online with your friends or playing single player games? And it's simple to me. If you're an online game and you want the best online experience, I'm going to point you towards the Xbox One. If you're looking for a little bit more single player friendly console, I'm going to point you towards the PlayStation 4. If you're somebody who's on the go and wants to play Legend of Zelda on the go, play Mario on the go, play Fire Emblem, play the new Pokemon, these are all great games. And if your intention is to be kind of like a get up and go person, then I would recommend the Switch. But when it just comes to online gaming, Nintendo's not there, and esports are becoming a huge thing. There's talks about esports being in the Olympics, and it blows my mind that Nintendo just hasn't figured it out yet. I have to and I get it. I have to download an app to use their online service. I guess that makes sense, right? For a console that has to be on the go, everybody's got smartphones nowadays. 13, 12, 11-year-olds have iPhones nowadays, right? It's just the truth. So the app isn't what bothers me. It's the infrastructure that's just not set up for it yet.
That's fair. All right, I've got a rebuttal for you. So you mentioned yourself that Sony is reputed to have a far inferior online setup in terms of accessibility, in terms of ability to easily connect with friends, in terms of just being able to go back and forth in a party system and play games with people that you play with. They have a far inferior internet system, right? Can we agree with that?
I wouldn't say far inferior, but there are definitely some. I think far's stretching it a little bit.
Okay. Far
I would say inferior. Yes.
That's hyperbole, but
yeah.
But you have the system with an inferior networking system, but it's selling on 2-to-1 by your own count. Sure. It's outselling Xbox.
It's not. It's from everybody's account. Like, these are facts, Yeah.
So my point is, the online play is fantastic. It's important, but it does not determine the success of a console.
Absolutely.
So just because of that, I think that what really matters in terms of marketing is how many people can you get to buy this item. Nintendo it's got a long history as far as gaming goes. It's got brand recognition in the homes of people that know very little about games. So I think that Nintendo, not necessarily the Switch, but Nintendo is always in a strong position. And I think that they are in a stronger position than either Sony or Microsoft may realize. And I don't think they're anything to sniff at. I actually think they are... they're a conservative company to some degree when it comes to the way they market and do their third-party games.
They're still very kid-friendly in a world, in a time where
edgy is in, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So that will hurt them, but I do think they're in a better position than we might think, simply because online play will not determine the success of a generation of consoles.
Sure.
And the Wii showed that, because when people bought the Wii, they weren't, hooking up online. They were playing to play with people right next to them.
Yeah.
Increasingly, what we see is Microsoft and Sony doing. There's no split screen. How many games do you play that don't have split screen support?
Mm-hmm.
I cannot think of a Nintendo system that has come out recently where you are not intended to play with people right next to you. So
Right.
I think that they should always be worried about Nintendo, because if they have a bad generation, Microsoft starts cutting employment and departments. Nintendo can afford to keep going and going and going and
Well, they've built their business off of video game consoles.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my end.
All right. Fair enough. If anything, Nintendo is, and you said this earlier, Nintendo isn't afraid to experiment. Whether it works for them or not, they're not afraid to experiment, and I think that's what gives them their charm, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Paris, thanks for sitting down and having this chat with me. Can't
Thanks
wait
for
to can't wait to do this again next week. Stay tuned. We don't have a topic yet, but we will be brainstorming some stuff. If you have anything you'd like us to talk about, or maybe go back and forth on, let us know in the comments, and we'll talk to you guys next week. See ya.
Carl, that kills people.